never give up, like keep pushing through things because you don't really know where you're going to end up if you keep trying. Like if you give up, you're not going to get anywhere. For me, the people that I've noticed that are the most impressive leaders, usually they have a lot of empathy. They're not usually like the taskmaster jerk that people kind of idolize in a lot of areas. I think the ones that have the broadest amount of success, not just those like ones that are way outside the axis, usually have a lot of empathy for the people around them, and people want to be around them and they want to work with them. For me, HR is this creative group of people that want to solve problems for the people that are working there and make it easier, more exciting.
Today's episode of the HR L&D Podcast is sponsored by Deal. Now take a moment, if you would, to consider the following pre-show scenario. Imagine you had to visit 16 houses just to cook your dinner. One place has the pots, another has the pans, another has the stove, and another has the food. You get the idea. Sounds ridiculous, right? Well, the reality is most global businesses operate exactly the same way, using 16 different tools and platforms to hire, manage, and pay their workforce. But now there's one platform that does it all, and that's today's sponsor. That's Deal. That's DEEL. And Deal is the all-in-one platform built for global work. So whether you're an enterprise business, a small company, or something in between, from automated onboarding to performance assessments and beyond, you can manage the entire worker lifecycle all under one roof. Hire and onboard talent in over 150 countries, or run payroll in over 100 countries. Even offer competitive benefits, equity, and equipment. With Deal's industry-leading suite of HR tools, payroll solutions, and compliance services, you can scale globally with unmatched speed and expertise. So are you ready to transform your global HR system? If you are, click in the link in the show notes to book a demo with Deal today. That's DEEL. Hello and welcome back to the HR L&D podcast. My name is Nick Day. I'm CEO at JGA Recruitment Group, and we're specialist global HR recruiters. If you are new to the show, please do remember to click subscribe. If you can review the show, that would be fantastic. But most importantly, please do share this with all of your HR colleagues and friends so that together we can really help raise the profile of human resources and people management globally, everywhere. Really raise the profile, because we're going to be talking to an absolute industry leader today, particularly in the world of HR tech. And our focus for today's episode is how we can really harness HR software to supercharge your HR process. So without further ado, let me introduce you to Andrew Swiler. Now, he's an HR tech pioneer and investment visionary. He's also the CEO of Lanteria.com. We're going to be finding out more about that business during the course of today's show. But let's just say they are a workforce development and HR management suite that's really, really supercharging those that are on the MS products in particular. But he's also helped to dedicate his support to cultivating a culture of high performance, talent development, optimizing performance for HR leaders, and also achieving sustainable growth. It's worth noting as well that Lanteria.com has earned recognition as the top HRMS solution for Microsoft users. Now, his career has consistently pushed the boundaries of HR solutions, from scaling teams to enhancing employee engagement and simplifying onboarding processes. So we're going to be diving deep today into his expertise, and we're going to be exploring how we can use all of that wealth of expertise that he's gained to date to really harness software to supercharge your HR operations. So without further ado, Andrew, welcome to the show. How are you feeling today?
Thanks, Nick. I'm feeling honored to be here, and hopefully I can live up to the intro that you just gave of me.
No doubt. I mean, I've been all over looking at all the work that you've been doing. I think it's going to be an exciting conversation, right? Because you've got expertise in lots of different parts of the HR process, and you've been able to utilize software to bring a lot of that together. But before we jump into that, let me ask you my first question, something I ask all of my guests. What do the words human resources mean to you?
So I've never worked in a large company. So I've never really had to deal with HR. So I know for a lot of people, there's this joke, like I'm in different HR groups, and like the HR people are like the grim reaper that come in when there's like a problem. So I've always been, for me, HR is this creative group of people that want to solve problems for the people that are working there and make it easier and more exciting to work at the companies that they're running. So that's kind of how I view HR, but I come from a really different world than the people that maybe work in a large corporate environment.
Yeah, no, fantastic. Well, I know you've also been involved in managing things like remote team management, supporting organizations to achieve that, harnessing software to improve their HR capacity, building high performance sales teams, and also acquisitions as well. I guess we know that HR solutions can deliver a lot, right? They can transform and really optimize an HR process. But in particular, what are the best ways to start that process if we want to be focused on improving high performance or if we want to start nurturing our talent?
So, I mean, I sell software. So you would think the first thing I would say would be you need to get a piece of software, but that's probably the last step that you should take inside of this. The first step, I think you need to really analyze the people in your team and the company and start from the top. Say, okay, our management team, what do we want this company to be? What is the culture we want to be? And then how do we make that permeate? And probably the best way to make that permeate is starting with creating direct contact and direct relationships with the people working with you and building up not just a rapport, but a regular feedback loop and regular conversation. So I'm a big fan of like one-on-one meetings, 360 reviews, but doing these things regularly and setting that up for people. Now, obviously, software helps facilitate this and helps make it easier. But from step one, like if you have the best piece of software, if your people on the ground aren't doing these basic things, then you're not really going to be able to supercharge your company. So it takes a piece of software to facilitate that and make it easier, make it more automated, make it better. But really step one is, setting up a process, setting up a plan from, it could be the HR team, could be management. It depends on sort of who sort of leads those types of initiatives. But get in front of your people, talk to them, listen to them, show them that you're listening and actually making changes. I think that's one of the fastest ways to take a company and make it, hyper speed, because people see when they see they have an impact, even if they're working like the warehouse, but the ideas they have make a change, they feel ownership. And for me, the only way for any sort of company to function well is that people feel like agency and ownership inside of that company, especially, as we talk about remote teams and things like that. Personally, I think remote only works if you're hiring people that want ownership in the company, not literal ownership of shares, but
Sure.
feeling like the work they do is actually contributing to something, or the opinion they have is actually changing things.
Sure. So is that sort of linking in a little bit then to starting with culture first and that Simon Sinek's idea of having purpose in the work that you do to empower them to achieve. So let me ask a question then. I'll be interested to know the answer, because you mentioned obviously your background is, and we're going to find out more today about, is all immersed in software. When you go into a new business that wants to bring in, let's say they want to bring Lanteria into their suite, and they say, okay, this is the right solution for us. And you walk into that business and you think that there are some problems with the culture. How do you overcome that? If they've got a culture first problem and they want to implement a system, how do you navigate that? What kind of steps would you take?
So that, I wouldn't say a culture problem. We're not really consultants of for HR. We try to, when we step in, we try and look at it just from a perspective of, we're going to implement software, and let's work with you with the systems that you've built and the team you built. Our confidence is that people have already taken those previous steps when we get there. So we don't get into the cultural part, but what we do get into is when you start looking at the basics of a company. Okay, we need to set up your org chart inside of our product. So let's implement your org chart. What does it look like? And we oftentimes get into companies, large companies, 1,000-person companies, and all of a sudden people start pointing fingers saying like, well, that person reports to you, right? No, but I thought they reported to you. And people don't have these things organized. So they don't have, the roof built on top of the foundation of the company is not there. So we often, this has happened several times, where we will implement a piece of software. We'll do the kickoff call. We'll do the first few weeks. We get the data in, we start working, and we get to, like I said, the org chart, and the company will disappear for 3 months. And we'll find out that they basically went back and redid their org chart, which is good in the sense, it's good in the sense that this was a moment for them to reflect and to make some changes or organize things a little bit more. So I think the implementation of a new piece of software does allow you to think organized, because usually we have, specific structure. We say you got to do things this way and this way. But it is surprising that you get into some of these big companies and that is still an issue that they're dealing with. And you would think that
it can highlight where there are gaps in their process, right? They've grown, they've scaled quickly. They haven't really thought that they've needed maybe they haven't needed an org chart. It's up 20 employees. They've grown to 1,000 very quickly. And you kind of think after the thought, maybe it'd be handy to have some of this stuff in place. That's quite a good output for a system process to actually get those ducks in line, if you like. But you mentioned a moment ago about hiring remote teams and how that shifted with technology in your first response. Now, I know that you've been quite heavily involved in helping companies to manage remote employees, and it's a very dynamic work environment now. So what kind of strategies would you recommend for a business that wants to be able to do that effectively?
People ask me this a lot. I honestly, I don't think there's a solution to take a company that is in person and turn it into a fully remote company. I think there are solutions to become hybrid and to be a little bit more flexible. But I think if you're a hybrid company, you're still tying your workforce to a specific location and to a specific region. And the interesting part, at least for me, to remote work is what you get from remote work as a company. I'm looking at this from a company perspective. You get the access to talent all over the world if you're willing and open and have the systems to do it. So for example, for us, when we're hiring, we will go to LinkedIn and post jobs in different countries, one day in one country, one day in the next country. And we just grab the best talent that we can find in any country, regardless of location, because we know we have a system that's asynchronous, that we can hire someone in the Philippines or in Russia or in Ukraine or in the United States, and they can function within our company. Now, it wasn't always like that. I mean, we had we acquired Lanteria, and Lanteria originally was an in-person company. And there were definitely people that were tied to that in-person lifestyle and that in-person relationship. And I think what people need to understand is that the people that go to work at an in-person company, typically they're not there just to be in person. They're there to build relationships. They're people that like that tightness of, I go to work and I know Mary's going to be there and we're going to talk and we're going to have coffee and we have sort of our ritual together. Where in remote work, you really have to be, like I said, somebody that wants to own their work, own their time. They have more priorities of being with their friends or doing things outside of work, and they don't prioritize building relationships inside of the companies they're in, outside of maybe the occasional in-person meeting that happens every 6 months. So I don't know if you can take an in-person company and turn it into a fully remote company, because I think there are too many things that you can do it if you're willing to make some big changes and probably assume that 40% of your workforce is going to change over, whether they like it or not. Because some people they're not going to like it. They're going to want those relationships. They're going to want to work for an in-person company. That's why I've worked remotely for 10 years, and I'm not like a maximalist of remote work where it's like, this is the future, this is the only way. I think there's going to be, there's going to be companies that are in person, companies that are remote, and it's all going to, the people that can work in remote are going to gravitate to those companies, and people that don't are going to gravitate to in person, and that's okay.
Sure.
Like anything else.
Fair enough. Yeah, no, for sure. You mentioned you acquired Lanteria. I know you've been quite heavily involved in investing in businesses and mergers and acquisitions and things like that. I know that I've been in this space now for 2 decades, but I would say the last 18 to 24 months, I have never seen so much transformation taking place, particularly in relation to HR systems, payroll systems. There seems to be a huge amount of focus on evolving HR tech, getting the latest tech, and I guess taking advantage of things like AI and automation, other things that happen. Why do you think that's suddenly gone so mad? Was it the pandemic that made us sort of sit back and realize and make change? Was it something else? And why in particular? You mentioned you acquired Lanteria, so sort of why now? Why was that even of interest for yourself?
So for us, it was of interest because it ticked a lot of boxes. I personally am interested in HR tech. I think it's a great market to be in. I think it's very sticky from like a business perspective. When you implement an HR system, those typically don't get ripped out easily. People, they tend to spend time. It takes a lot of implementation, a lot of time, a lot of thinking that goes into it. So for me, that was interesting. To be honest, it fell into our lap. It was an opportunity that came to us because the founders were looking to sell. So it wasn't something that we had said, just HR tech, this is the only thing. But since we got into this, we are 100% focused on HR tech. We see the value, we see the interesting part of this. And why is this happening now? Well, the byproduct is a lot of money came into this market in the last 36 months, more than that now, since COVID, because of that shift, because people were going remotely. And so a bunch of VCs had a thesis of, okay, this is going to have to change, and there's going to have to be tools that help us change. So it's not just Zoom, it's not just Google Meets, it's going to be all these different point solutions, these HRMSs that are out there, these suites. And so a bunch of money came into the space because whenever there's change, you assume that there's going to be a winner and there's going to be some new things that come out of it. So a lot of people made bets where HR tech 8 years ago maybe wasn't as interesting to people. It was after the pandemic, just because there had to be a shift in the way people were going to work. And we've seen it from VC money. I mean, we have a half a dozen competitors that have raised almost $1 billion each over the past 4 years.
Yeah, it's been crazy. I mean, I follow a number of newsletters that kind of follow the kind of companies that are getting that investment. Obviously, it's interest to us as a recruiter. We try and follow what they're doing as well to see if we can support them. And it's just been crazy. The last 24 months in particular have been mad. The kind of companies that have been scaling and growing and offering new solutions to the market. So we bring it back into the context of today's conversation and of how we can utilize HR tech to supercharge an HR process. What are the kind of things that you're doing in the market? What are the kind of things that HR professionals perhaps may not have considered? They want to revolutionize the way they're doing things, and they don't even know perhaps some of the functionality out there even exists. What are the things they can think about?
So there's a lot of things that an HR management system can do, and there's a lot of point solutions for things. I mean, the key thing for any HR management system is taking the paper out of your daily life. I mean, like the physical paper, but also just the mentally thinking about, okay, we have an ATS and we have, we're moving these applicants through the tracking system, and now we're going to hire them. Before, these things didn't communicate with each other. So we had the people applying. Now we had to send them all the paperwork. We had to take care of the paperwork. The great thing about a lot of these HRMS, like what we have, is that from the application phase, all that information's already been filled out online automatically. Now, when that person gets hired, you just click a button that gets moved over. Now they're an employee, and inside of their employee, they get all their information from payrolls coming in there. Where before that envelope that used to show up on your desk every day that had your payroll stub. These are all things that HR had to keep track of and moving parts that now automatically just sit inside of the person's dashboard. They need a login, which they log in for, in our case, with Microsoft, with their Microsoft login they use for Outlook anyways. So they go in there, pay stubs are in there, performance management's in there. But the key thing about performance management too is that now HR and management have put together a plan where, this is how we want to do performance management. And each middle manager can adapt that plan however they want and ask certain questions or do the performance management in a certain way. But there also be, you're able to dictate from a centrally located place to say, hey, before, Bob in accounting was doing his performance management with his team in one way and wasn't communicated to anyone else. And it just kind of showed up on HR's desk if there was a problem. Now everyone can see all this information there. The employee can see, what is my boss, direct boss, and what is the HR team thinking about me, talking to me about? How is my performance being evaluated? What are the questions being asked? And HR can see this all the way through as well, where before this was a lot of hands-on work where people had to sit and do meetings. And now it can be done automatically inside of, the performance management module of an HRMS. Beyond that, anything around, time and attendance, which has, boomed in the last, I'd say 10 years. That was sort of like the original use case for a lot of these systems was, how do we track when people are in and out of the office and when they're sick and when they're not? And that's been a tremendous time saver. But I would say that was like version 1.0 of a lot of these systems that has saved time. And then the key thing for us, that we have a learning management system. And what we see, at least from a difference maker for us, is that in the onboarding process, being able to set up a whole onboarding for somebody, but also with the lessons and the training that they need that is built into the system, and you don't need to tell them, oh yeah, you need to go over here, you need to go over there. And even ours is built into Microsoft Teams. So if you're using Microsoft Teams, people, that's their hub. They go in there, they say, hey, your onboarding is already here. All the training that you need is there. But in ongoing training, it's even more important because a lot of companies have, for example, we work a lot with shipping companies, and they have a lot of licensing for their employees that need to be done, or construction companies that have a lot of licensing as well for, using forklifts or using certain types of machines. They can run all their training and all their licensing inside of a learning management system. And you can see who's done it, who hasn't, who's licensed, who's not, and be able to keep all that reporting for, an audit that might come in. And now you don't need to be chasing all this down or have, a whole row of documents behind your shelves. You've got it all sitting here digitally, and it makes life, frankly, a lot easier for HR. And like I said, I think HR people, at least the ones I know, they're not here for compliance. Compliance is just a byproduct that they were just kind of shoved into. They really like people. I mean, I know a lot of HR people, they'd rather be coaching people than running compliance or coming after someone and being like, hey, you did this, or mediating problems. They'd rather be helping people grow.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. And actually, some of the fears we get, and I've covered on this show from HR people, is that all this tech is going to potentially, I don't know, take over their positions to a certain degree, but actually does the
Yeah.
opposite. It allows them to be more human-centric again, right? It automates all those tasks, all that onboarding, all that compliance stuff. It's a better record. It's kept digitally. It's safer. It's quicker. As you said, it can identify problems before they begin because you can see the trail. You can potentially identify performance management issues before they occur because you can see the trail and the engagement service and so on, which actually allows the HR folk to be more human-centric, to be more in person and actually deliver the coaching, the support and things they actually need to do, which I think is really important. You mentioned reporting a few times. And one of the biggest things we've seen recently is the proliferation of webinars and podcasts and also talking about the power of HR data and utilizing analytics to deliver a better HR experience, to improve performance. Where have you seen the real, trends or shifts in relation to how HR professionals are using analytics, and how far can it go? What analytics are we going to be looking at in the future that perhaps we're not even looking at now? Hello, HR and people leaders. Are you exhausted of the war for talent cliche? The problem is when we hear a cliche, it usually exists for a reason. However, we think it's time for a fresh approach to the talent crisis. That's because at JGA Recruitment, we understand the real challenges you face in sourcing phenomenal HR and people candidates. And guess what? We think we have the solution. Our team is on a mission to revolutionize your hiring process. That's because we're not just recruiters. We're strategic partners dedicated to finding HR and people professionals who align perfectly with your company's vision and goals. So let's break the cycle of frustration together. Partner your talent acquisition strategies with JGA Recruitment and experience the difference in service, excellence, and results. No longer do you need to suffer the costs associated with a poor hire, because with over 100 five-star Google reviews and already trusted by many of the world's leading brands, why don't you take action today? Contact us at jjrecruitment.com to discover how we can help transform your HR and people teams. And here's a bonus. When you visit us, you can sign up for our weekly HR newsletter that's packed with invaluable industry insights and more. Let's revolutionize your HR talent acquisition strategies together and make the war for talent a cry from the past. Visit jjrecruitment.com to find out more.
Frankly, I think this is where HR is further behind pretty much any other function inside of companies. Okay. I think if you look especially at the technology that accounting, marketing, finance, engineering has had, just to name a few functions inside of a company, the proliferation of this type of stuff in analytics has been enormous for 15 years. And I would say HR is just getting there. And so we do case studies a lot with our companies. And I look at case studies of a lot of our competitors too. I notice a huge lack in statistics outside of basically there's two statistics that I see most people tracking, which is employee retention. And if they're in recruiting mode, what does our funnel look like? How many applicants are we getting? How many are getting to this phase? How many are we hiring? Those cost are really
of a bad hire as well, right? Which kind of links into retention. Cost of a bad hire, cost of good talent leaving the business, all links to retention. 100%. That's the stats that maybe they're the stats I look for in my world. But
so right. I think it's moving in this direction, but I think in HR we've been a lot slower to do this. And I don't blame the HR department. I would say a lot of times HR was viewed as a sort of like soft skill. And like I said, it was focused a lot on compliance and like sort of these soft things that we don't really know how to track. And a lot of like what you were just talking about, like what is the cost of a bad hire? That sort of fell on accounting or finance to sort of review that, where I think now we'll start seeing HR being more involved in this type of stuff and being more analytical. And I do see, I see a lot of companies that have brought, the the person that's leading HR actually has come from a finance background and just had sort of the soft skills to also be able to do this. And I think a lot of companies are going to start moving in this direction, but there is, like in Silicon Valley, there's a huge dogma now around, they think that the CEOs or potential CEOs of companies should be the people that were in the people position, the people that were hiring or the people that were in this HR position, because kind of reflecting on what you just said, everyone thinks they're going to lose their job because of AI, because of technology, and the opposite is happening. Like the companies with the fastest growth and the highest enterprise value are the companies with the highest ratings on Glassdoor. because people are the most important part, and everyone knows that. Like, when do things fall apart? Because of the people. So the HR function is more important than ever, and people are seeing that in like Silicon Valley, that they're saying, the people person should be the person elevated to CEO, because they're the ones that really can control, the environment, the social interactions between the people, the way that companies really do grow compared to just finance or just engineering or just product.
Sure.
So,
and actually, we're seeing the companies that are harnessing tech and AI and analytics typically are the companies that are scaling quickest, right? So they're hiring more people. You're not letting people go. They're utilizing it to build businesses quicker, get the profit faster. They need people to help deliver that. So we're seeing that shift as well. But if I was an HR professional, then let's say that I haven't revolutionized my system for a number of years. I'm using the data that I've had for maybe just for my payroll team or whatever that haven't really utilized for strategic purposes. I wonder if you can give some insights into, you said a lot of case studies on how data can be used effectively, either to improve maybe employee engagement or performance. Have you got any case studies or examples of where one of your users, one of your clients have perhaps changed the way they manage their business as a result of the newfound data they've had at their fingertips?
As far as, like I said before, this is one of the frustrating things about trying to build these is we do try and get this data. And a lot of times the only data we get back is in retention. So retention and in revenue growth. But a lot of times the issue is revenue growth doesn't get attributed 100% to this change that maybe happened, where doing weekly one-on-ones or tracking the one-on-ones or tracking, for example, one of the companies that we work with was building inside of our product a career path, not a career path, I forget what it's called, but a career progression for employees. So trying to find a way where they would basically set a goal of where this employee should be in 5 years. And they started doing this, I think, 2 years ago, and they noticed a huge amount of retention because people were feeling like there was sort of this place for them to go. This functions well in companies that are growing. If you're a company that's relatively stagnant, it's hard because people know that somebody has to leave a seat for me to move up. But if you see that it's companies expanding and going from 200 to 500 or 500 to 1,000, they know that there could be potential roles in the future. We've seen a lot of people being able to use that, but it is a frustrating part for us trying to get real statistics. And it's one of the things that we're working on. Like, I think with AI, one of the things that we're trying right now is with Microsoft Teams and with Copilot, where we see a lot of this going is before, if you wanted to build a dashboard, like with our product or with Lattice or with anything else, you needed to hire somebody or you needed to send a request to the company to build this, or you needed to be technical to be able to build or use Power BI or something like that. Where we see this going is that you're going to be able to tell Copilot, access Lanteria, through Microsoft Teams. I want a dashboard about our employee retention numbers since, September 9th. And I want it laid out in this format with these colors. And I want, the x-axis to be these many months and the y-axis to be this many units. And you'll be able to make those and it'll pop up instantly. And I think for HR, that's going to be a huge difference maker because it's not a technical role. It's a role usually not reserved for technical people. So they can't do things like that. So simple language models where they can basically code by just talking to Copilot is going to make a big difference, I think, for this role and for these types of products where right now I think it's more simple.
Yeah, and I like the idea of, I don't mean to naturally link it to retention. Maybe I've just been that way inclined now because of, as you said, it's all the data I see. But, if you're able to create these kind of dashboards, it allows HR professionals to track whether their onboarding processes are working effectively. Are they losing people at the onboarding phase? Are they losing people at the, the attraction phase and counter offers? What part of their duration are they losing people to link it back to retention? You can look at employee engagement surveys and build those out to work out how you can improve utilization of benefits and so on and so forth. I think it's really exciting because it's those aspects that allow HR to also deliver more value back that isn't just human-centric. It's a financial value to it, right? Because we do know that recruitment can be expensive. Losing good talent is expensive. And you've gone over a period of time, as you mentioned. That's where I think you can find huge strategic value in having a really robust system and dashboards to track that stuff over time. And you can deliver that back then to C-suite and raise your profile as an HR professional as well.
Yeah. You grow your budget too. You get more money from
well, that. Right, that's absolutely right. So look, I'm keen because you mentioned the case study piece. So tell me a little bit more about Lanteria themselves and what you are as a business. If you've got any real world examples of how Lanteria.com and their solutions have supercharged HR within organizations, I'd love to hear them. Love to sort of bring it into the fore so people can understand a bit more about what your product is and what you do.
So one of the areas that we've supercharged is in inorganic growth with companies. So we work with a shipping company called OSM Shipping. They're one of the largest shipping companies in the world. They've acquired, I don't know how many companies they've acquired since they started working with us about 8 years ago. One of the key things they've been able to do is, every time you acquire a company, obviously they probably have a different HRIS system or they have, different data sets or whatever. They've been able to work with our internal team and be able to absorb these new companies into our product and bring them from, whatever HR systems they were on before, easily implemented into ours, and then also effectively say, like, instead of, they're acquiring by different countries. So like they're trying to buy companies that are shipping in Norway and then buy companies shipping in Singapore. So they're able to integrate that into our system where this is just a new office, basically. So instead of integrating a new company or needing a new license or needing a new product because it's very localized, a lot of times some of these HR systems, they're able to absorb those companies, put them into our system, and set it up basically as just a new office inside of our product. We do sometimes have to customize certain things because there are local laws or local workflows that need to be done for, time and attendance things. Oftentimes that's the issue. But that's one of the ways. I think they've gone from 500 employees to 5,000 employees since they started working with us. And a lot of it was through absorbing new companies and through mergers and acquisitions. And each merger is getting bigger, and we've managed to sort of be the winning HRMS inside of that every time, which has been a great key piece of that. But then also when they're onboarding new people into this new company, obviously it's not just like, well, just keep doing what you're doing. It's like, no, now we're a whole new company. So they're able to take, they've built out some like new onboarding pieces for specific, because, shipping companies are relatively similar. So they know exactly who needs to go through each onboarding phase, each onboarding process, understand the new systems, understand the new company, the new culture. So they've built all that out inside of our system and allowed them to move faster and sort of homogenizing some of these new integrations into their company, which has been cool to watch. And frankly, we're the type of company, we don't work with high tech, high growth startup companies. There's a bunch of other companies that do that, and they do it.
Yeah.
They do it well. They spend a ton of money to win that business, and we just don't. We have a pocket knife, and we don't have the cannon or the bazooka to go fight with them. So we work a lot with these sort of more traditional companies, factories, aeronautics companies. And what we see is they also, we work with companies that have very specific hiring practices, very specific people they're hiring with licensing. And one of the cool things, like I mentioned before, was the fact that we're one of the few companies that allow you to have the licensing there and allow you to be audited from, local inspectors, and everything's ready. And it also advises you to say, because you're able to sort of customize the types of things that are needed for each employee inside of our system. So if there is specific licensing needed, we're one of the few companies that allow you to set that up locally, like a specific license is needed, where it's, in an out of the box type of product like bamboo or high bob or something like that. It might be a little bit more complex or not possible at all. So those are a couple examples that we have of companies that have succeeded using us. Beyond that, I mean, we have a lot of companies that come to us because our performance management is super robust. And one of the things that we do different from other companies is that you might need to come in at one of our competitors and just take how they do things. So you might be doing things a certain way as far as performance management, but when you go to one of these other companies, you just have to follow their pattern. They say like, well, this is our out of the box software. This is how it works. Where we kind of differentiate is that we're able to adapt because we're built on SharePoint and on Microsoft. We're able to customize our product pretty easily to the customer's needs and take their current workflows and their current way of doing things and adapt it into our system, which allows us to differentiate quite a bit from out of the box products.
And we've seen that's what clients want as well these days, right? And that's why there's been a lot more API based sort of systems being developed as well. People can pick and choose and use the bit that they need. I know I mentioned in my introduction, you've earned recognition as one of the top HRMSs for Microsoft users. So you've got that market as well, which is, if you're Microsoft user, that's going to be appealing, right? But with all the work you're doing though, and all the things, the feedback you're getting, the case studies, not just that you're getting yourself, but you're reading on some of your competitors and other systems. What excites you about the market going forward? What's the solution that hasn't yet been created, that isn't out there, that perhaps you guys are working on, or maybe a problem that is you're seeing come into the market that's going to need some consideration? So to bring it into context, more recently, following the Great Resignation, there's been a massive shift towards making sure that people are fully engaged, that they're bought into what they're trying to do, that it's not just a values on a post-it, it's actually we're embodying those and finding ways to track it. Then we've seen movements into the world of AI and making sure that we're utilizing it smartly, but we're keeping that human-centric approach. What's next, and what are the things you're excited about developing and working on?
I mentioned before some of the things in AI where I think those are the most applicable things, I think, to HR. Like I really think that this is going to become where the HR team can manipulate the product using simple language rather than needing somebody to be technical to do it.
Yeah, I love the idea of that. Sounds cool. It just sounds cool to be able to do it. Like, create me a dashboard, and it's just fun.
It is
cool.
First
got ChatGPT, right? It just ended up creating loads of dashboards, but
yeah, it's still early stage. I'd say as far as like the design pieces and things like that go, we're probably a couple years away from being able to do that. But it is pretty amazing what you can do. Just if you do have some technical talent, like you could be able to do this very easily today inside the companies. It just needs that extra step where it'll be able to, bring the image to you rather than you needing to do that like extra step of putting it into Power BI, for example. Sure. I think the toughest nut to crack right now is the remote work, how people are managing across different countries or across different just regions and being able to hire that kind of talent. There's companies like Deal or remote.com that have done a very good job of making it easier to hire in different regions, taking away a lot of that compliance and a lot of that paperwork. I would argue that most of the top ones are very expensive for what they actually do. I use personally a few of their competitors that are much more affordable, or I even sometimes go directly. Like we have an EOR in India. That's something I don't think has been fully solved yet. But I think what you were saying, the employee engagement part, a lot of the employee engagement platforms, and because we look at like acquiring other companies as well, I get pitched a lot. There's a ton of employee engagement platforms that popped up over the last, I would say 3 years.
Yeah, we've seen them as well. Yeah.
Yeah. It feels like something that, that people in a boardroom would find interesting. And you can see that even from their sales. Like a lot of them have pretty high sales, but their retention is very low. And the actual user experience is very low as far as like redeeming these things. I don't know. We have our own podcast where we invite some HR experts on too. And I've had conversations about people about outside of salary, what is it that people want? Like, what is the compensation, like the whole compensation package? And a lot of times people talk about these like big, all these extras and all this other stuff. And I feel like it's kind of window dressing for what people really want is to get paid well, be respected, and feel pretty safe inside of their environment. Where the rest of it's kind of like, this is nice. Like I do know people that have like, they pay for your gym membership. That's a nice thing. But like getting like a Starbucks gift card or getting, a gift card to like a movie theater because you did this, or like kudos for this. Go see a movie this weekend. All this stuff, it feels pretty empty, feels pretty hollow to me, to be honest. And I don't think anyone's cracked that. I am looking because I do think that the employee engagement, that people feel good and feel recognized and feel like people notice the work they're doing, is an important piece. And it's something that we're working on, trying to see like, what feels authentic, not just like, hey, great job, Mark. It's something I haven't figured out.
My 2 pennies worth. I'm a big fan of it. It's a Chinese proverb that kind of says that be happy for an hour sleep, a day fish, for a year inherit a million. But if you want to be happy for a lifetime, give to others. I think the solution's in there somewhere. There's an opportunity to either give back through charitable work, or whether it could even be family or could be friends, but whatever it is that speaks to you that creates happiness around the world of giving. If we can link that to an employee proposition that maybe you get time back for work, but we're not just time to be sat at home watching, the idiot box or whatever. It's time to do something worthy. I think then if you're able to relate that back to your employer that's enabling you to do that thing, I think that's one way of really helping you get. Well, what that solution is, I don't know, but that's where I would start. I think that might, if you can find the right solution behind that, I think someone might make headway, because that's not about trinkets. It's not about vouchers. It's about doing something for someone else. That's what holistically really makes us feel good inside. I know it sounds a bit cliched, but got to listen to cliches sometimes.
No, it's true. I think giving back to people, and also people feeling, I think people also want to be recognized for that they're humans, that they want to be recognized by their interests outside of work. That somebody kind of recognized that. Even building groups inside of companies of people that, are rollerbladers, for example, and they know that there's others, things like that tie people to companies where they feel like, oh, I have like a tribe here. I have people that I can relate to that do similar things. And not all of us, but there are groups of people inside the company, and that keeps them in these places, even if they're, overseas. Like I know companies that they use Strava inside the company because they have, 10 guys that bike inside the company, and they race with each other in different ways. And they try and find similar paths that they can take to be able to like race and compete with each other. And that's cool ways to bond, even though you're living, one's in Thailand and one's in London.
And of course, if it's not in Strava, it doesn't count. So you need those things.
Yeah, right? Exactly.
Well, exactly. Thank you for giving us lots of advice and guidance into the world of HR systems, how they can supercharge HR. I'm going to open the HR L&D vault. So 3 short, sharp questions for you, Andrew. First one is this: if you could give one piece of advice to the world, it's quite a big question, what would it be?
So it's tough. I would say never give up. Like keep pushing through things, because you don't really know where you're going to end up if you keep trying. Like if you give up, you're not going to get anywhere.
Love it. I like the idea of this too shall pass. The idea that even if you're having a tough time, right, it'll go. So it's all the other way around of that. If you had the opportunity, what advice would you give to a younger you just starting out in this new dynamic world of work?
Would it literally be me, like in 2002?
Yeah. You're looking back. What would you do?
I would have said, my answer is always easy. I would have said, in 2009, buy Bitcoin.
Buy Bitcoin. Fair enough.
No, but that's an easier fun. What would I have given myself? I would say try a lot of different things early on, and try and find one that you can stick with long term, because relationships and markets compound. The longer you're in something, the easier it is to push that boulder up the hill.
Yeah, nice. And your career is a long time as well, right? It's important you do something you want to do. Otherwise, you get stuck in something you don't. That would be hellish.
Yep.
And last but not least, what is the sort of one guiding principle behavior that you see in every great leader that you've worked with?
So I unfortunately, I've been an entrepreneur for a long time, and I haven't worked with a lot of really great leaders. So it's hard for me to say, and I'm not like an idolizer. Like I have friends that love Elon Musk, and they like look up to Steve Jobs, and I find it more like, great, that very interesting people. For me, the people that I've noticed that are the most impressive leaders, usually they have a lot of empathy. They're not usually like the taskmaster jerk that people kind of idolize in a lot of areas. I think the ones that have the broadest amount of success, not just those like ones that are way outside the axis, usually have a lot of empathy for the people around them, and people want to be around them and they want to work with them.
Yeah, can't challenge that. It's probably the most popular answer we get to that question as well.
Okay.
So, without having worked with that many, you've nailed it. But listen, if people want to find out more about Lanteria, where can we direct them? What links would you like to share with our listeners?
So Lanteria is Lanteria.com. Go in there, check it out. Our sales team's always happy to answer any questions and kind of find out what you might need. And you can find me usually on LinkedIn, Andrew Swiler, Swiler, or on Twitter. My handle is Swiler, Swilera. Those are my 2 places. I don't have Instagram. I don't have OnlyFans. Just those 2 things.
No worries. Well, listen, I'll make sure those 3 links are available to our listeners. So if you're listening to this and you want to find out more about Lanteria.com and you want to go straight through to the site, go to our show notes. You can click straight through to the URL. I'll put Andrew's LinkedIn profile there for you as well, so you can easily find him if you're not connected, along with his Twitter profile. Listen, Andrew, thank you ever so much for joining me today on the HR L&D podcast. And of course, if you are an HR professional and need support to recruit an HR leader or professional or an L&D professional, then please do get in touch with either myself or my team. Our link will also be in the show notes. It's jgarecruitment.com. deal.com. Andrew, thank you once again. And I look forward to being the next episode of the HR L&D podcast real soon. Cheers, Andrew. Today's episode of the HR L&D podcast is sponsored by Deal, the all-in-one global people platform that simplifies how you manage the entire global team lifecycle. From contractors, direct employees, EOR, and more, you can manage them all in one place with Deal. Hire and onboard talent in over 150 countries in minutes, or run payroll in over 100 countries with just one click. Offer competitive benefits, equipment, and equity from a single dashboard. Even customized career roadmaps, performance assessments, and more for your team through Deal's suite of AI-powered learning and development tools. So no matter your global business goals, Deal's team of over 200 legal experts keeps you compliant with local laws every step of the way. So whether you're an enterprise business, a small company, or something in between, Deal is built to meet your unique global HR needs. Ready to transform your global HR? Click the link in the show notes to book a demo with Deal today. That's DEEL.